Welcome back to Inside the Philippines Journals. This is the channel where men who went looking for a fresh start on the other side of the world sit down and tell you, honestly, how it actually went. No polish, no trailer music, just the truth, the way they lived it. The man you're going to hear from today is named Randy. He's 47 years old, a delivery driver out of Texas, a fellow who spent most of his life behind a wheel, watching a clock and an odometer, doing an honest day's work. He's younger than most of the men who tell us these stories, and he'll be the first to admit he was a good deal cockier than most of them too. That's part of it. That's a lot of it, actually. Randy came to the Philippines carrying money in one pocket and a whole lot of heartache in the other. Something had broken back home. The kind of break that costs a man his marriage and most of his good name in the same bad year. And he did what more than a few of us have thought about doing when the walls close in. He sold everything he had, took the cash, and started clean somewhere the sun never quits. I'm not going to tell you how it turned out. That's his to tell. I'll just say this. It is not a simple story, and he is not a simple victim. And by the end, you might find yourself feeling more than one thing at a time. That's usually how the real ones go. Before we start, do me a favor. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We've got folks all over the world listening in, and I like knowing who's out there in the dark with us. If you've lived a piece of this yourself, share it. Somebody further down that thread needs to hear it from a person who's been there. And if these stories mean something to you, hit that like button and subscribe so we can keep bringing them to you. All right, here's his story, in his own words. I drove a delivery route for 19 years. Same city, mostly. Same streets. I could tell you which houses had the mean dogs, and which porches had the loose board that'd bark your shin, and which old lady on Magnolia Street would flag me down for a chat every single time whether she had a package coming or not. That was my life, and I was fine with it. People act like driving all day is nothing. But there's a rhythm to it. You watch the world go by through a windshield long enough, you start to think you've got it all figured out. I did not have it figured out. Let me be straight with you about that right up front, so you don't spend this whole thing thinking I'm about to tell you I was some innocent. The year everything came apart, I was 43. My wife, my first wife, Carol, she'd been done with me a good while, I think, before I ever noticed. That's the thing about being on the road. You come home tired, you eat something standing at the counter, you sleep, you go again before light. And one day the other side of the bed is just cold, and you can't rightly remember when it went cold or whose fault that was. She left, and it got ugly, the way it does, over money and the house and whose fault the whole marriage was. Lawyers. I'd never had a lawyer in my life. 43 years, and all of a sudden I had two of them, and neither one was cheap. And then, I'm not proud of this, and I'll say it plain because I promised the man who runs this channel I'd tell it honest. I got pulled over one night, coming back from a buddy's place out on the county road. I'd had a lot more than I should have. A lot more. And they took my license. For a delivery driver, your license is your whole entire world. No license, no route. No route, no paycheck. No paycheck, no nothing. The company let me go quiet, didn't make a big fuss of it, but I was gone all the same. So picture it. 43 years old, divorced, a DUI sitting on my record like a stain on a good shirt, behind on everything that could be behind. Half the town whispering about me over by the feed store, the men I'd known since high school going quiet when I walked up. My name, which had been a decent name, a name that meant on time and does right and pays what he owes. That name was Mud. That's the part that got me worst. Not the money. The name. But here's the one thing I still had. The house. Carol and I had bought it years back. Cheap, when that side of town was nothing but weeds and stray cats. And over the years, the neighborhood had turned around and gotten desirable. So when the dust finally settled on the divorce, and I sold out my half, and then I sold off the little bit of land my daddy'd left me when he passed, I walked away with a little over $200,000. Cash, free, and clear. More money than I had ever in my life seen sitting in one place, with my name on top of it. And I sat there in a rented room that smelled like the last fella's cigarettes, and I thought, I am not going to spend the back half of my life in this town being the guy who blew it. I'm going to go somewhere nobody's ever heard my name, and I'm going to be somebody again. I don't even fully remember how I ended up in those Facebook groups. Late nights, mostly. Couldn't sleep, just scrolling. And that phone knows what a lonely man is looking for before the man knows it himself. There were these expat groups, guys living over in Thailand and the Philippines, posting pictures of beaches and cold beer that cost $1. And, I'll be honest with you, pretty women who seemed genuinely happy to be standing there next to some ordinary sunburned fella who looked no better off than me. And I thought, well, hell, those boys don't look one bit smarter than I am. And that is where I first got to talking with Maricel. She wasn't one of these girls firing off the same message to 50 men at once. Or that's what I came to believe, anyway. And you can judge me for it later. She left a comment on something I'd posted, some dumb joke, I couldn't even tell you what. And it was funny back, and it was sharp. And we got to going back and forth in the comments, and then in the messages. She was 34, from a province down in the Visayas, a little town called Guimbal, just outside Iloilo City. She worked behind the counter at a pharmacy. Her English was a whole lot better than mine, which admittedly is not a high bar, and she had this way about her of asking me real questions, not, you send me load for my phone. Not any of that. She asked me about my route. She asked what Texas smelled like in the summer. Nobody had asked me an honest question about myself in about 2 years, and I'd forgotten how good it felt to have an answer somebody wanted to hear. We talked every single day for 4 months before I ever once said the word visit. Every morning, "Good morning, Randy," with the sun already up over the palm trees behind her while it was still black dark in my kitchen. She'd be clocking off her shift about the time I was pouring my first coffee. We were on opposite sides of the whole clock, 12, 13 hours apart, and somehow that made it feel like we were passing the day back and forth between us, keeping it lit, never once setting it down. She'd tell me little things. That's what got me. Not big romantic speeches, just little ordinary things, the kind you only tell somebody you've decided to trust. That she was scared of the neighbor's rooster as a girl, that she'd wanted to be a nurse but the money ran out after 2 years of college and she had to take the pharmacy job, that she prayed the rosary on the jeepney every morning because the driving out there would put the fear of God in anybody. And I'd tell her mine. About Carol, some of it. About my daddy. About the DUI, even, which I hadn't told a living soul out loud. And she didn't flinch. She didn't judge me 1 inch. She just said everybody has a night they'd take back, and God already forgave me for mine, so why was I still carrying it? I sat there in my dark kitchen at 4 in the morning, with hot eyes over a woman I'd never once touched, 10,000 miles away. That's where I was. That's how far down and how far gone. Now, did she ask me for money in those 4 months? No, not one time. I want you to really hear that, because later on, everybody in the world wants to tell you, "Oh, you fool, they always ask right off." She did not. And that is exactly the thing that made me trust it all the way down. I even offered her money one time. She mentioned, just in passing, that her little scooter had broke down, and she was having to take the jeepney to work. And I said, "Let me send you a little something to fix it." And she got almost angry with me. Said she wasn't that kind of a girl. Said if that's what I thought she was, I could go on and find myself somebody else. I think about that moment a lot now, about how good she was at it, if that's what it was, or how real it was, if that's what it was. I've had 2 years to sit with it, and I still can't hand you a clean answer. And I've decided that not being able to is the truest thing about the whole story. All I knew back then was that I was 43 going on 44, sitting in a rented room in Texas with a suspended license and better than $200,000, and a phone that lit up every single morning with a woman who seemed flat out glad I existed. You go ahead and tell me what you would have done. I bought the ticket in the spring. One way, which my brother told me was pure insane, and which I told him to mind his own business about. I remember standing out at the mailbox with my bags already loaded in the truck, looking down that quiet little street I'd driven 10,000 times over 19 years, and thinking to myself, I am never going to miss this, not one single bit of it. Turns out, a man can be that certain and that wrong at the very same time. I'd get real good at that particular trick before it was all over. The flight into Iloilo just about did me in. 30-some hours all told, the long haul across the Pacific, a Manila layover where I got lost twice, and then that little puddle jumper hop down into the Visayas in a plane that felt like a tin can with wings bolted on. But when they cracked that door open, Lord have mercy, that heat. It is not Texas heat, I'll tell you. Texas heat is a dry oven. This was a wet heat. It came up around you like a warm, damp towel somebody was pressing over your whole face, and it smelled like diesel exhaust and salt water and something green and sweet all mixed up together. I stood on that tarmac, sweating clean through my good shirt and grinning like a fool. And there she was, just past the little chain-link fence outside the terminal, up on her toes, waving both arms. In person. Real as this table I'm sitting at. Smaller than I'd pictured. The camera makes everybody bigger than they are, I found out. But that face. That same face I'd been telling good morning to for 4 months straight. And when she caught sight of me, she put both her hands up over her mouth and just started to cry. Right there in front of God and everybody. And I thought, okay. Whatever else this turns out to be, this part right here is real. She'd brought a cousin along with her, a young woman named Grace, because she said it wasn't proper for a decent girl to go meet a man all by herself. And I'll tell you, that got me too. That old-fashioned thing. Back home, don't nobody worry about proper anymore, hadn't in years. And here was a grown woman who'd traveled 2 hours by van down from her province to come meet me, and she'd brought along a chaperone on account of what the neighbors might say. It felt like I'd stepped clean back into a world I thought had died out before I was born. Those first couple of weeks were the best weeks of my whole entire life. I'll say that flat out, and I've had every reason since to take it back, and I won't do it. We stayed at a little guest house near the water there in Iloilo City. Separate rooms. She insisted on it, and I respected that. And honestly, it made me trust her more. During the days, she showed me her whole world. We ate at a Mang Inasal near the plaza, this chicken barbecue on a stick with a big heaping mound of rice that she kept getting the girl to refill, telling me, "Unlai rice, Randy, unlai rice," laughing herself sick at how a big Texas boy couldn't keep up with her on rice. We rode the jeepneys, packed shoulder to shoulder with everybody's market bags, and one time a fella had 2 live chickens upside down by the feet, and Maricel just translated the little hand-painted signs for me and squeezed my arm every time I flinched at the traffic. We rode out to Gimbal to see the old Spanish church, this enormous coral stone thing, hundreds of years old, the walls 3 foot thick. And she lit a candle and knelt down and prayed. And I just stood there, in the cool dark of it, breathing in the wax and the old stone, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long, long while. Small, I guess. Small, in a good way. Like the world was bigger than my troubles for once. Then she took me on home to meet her people. And I'll tell you, that is where the real story starts. That is where the money starts, too. Though it came on so soft and gentle, I never heard it coming. They lived out past the town proper, down a rough dirt road, a whole cluster of houses set together on family land. Her mother, a married sister, an uncle, kids running everywhere half-dressed. The main house was concrete block on the bottom and half-finished up on top, with rebar poking up out of the roof toward the sky like it was standing there, waiting on something better to come along. Chickens in the yard, a couple of skinny brown dogs, a basketball hoop somebody'd nailed to a coconut tree, the net long gone, and karaoke coming from somewhere down the lane, always, day and night both, somebody's auntie absolutely murdering a Celine Dion song at 9 in the morning. Her mother, Nanai Faye, everybody called her, Nanai meaning mother, took one look at me coming up that road and burst into tears and grabbed a hold of both my hands. Didn't speak a word of English, not one, but she held onto my hands and patted my chest and looked up into my face like I was something the good Lord had personally sent down from heaven for her family. And the brother, Boyet, maybe 25 years old, shook my hand and looked me square in the eye and said, "Salamat po, sir. Thank you for making my sister happy." And I believed every last word of it. Why on earth wouldn't I have? They fed me that day until I about split my britches. Lechon, a whole roast pig, turned all day on a spit over coals, and they'd killed it special for me, which I only understood later was a big deal. That's not a random Tuesday thing. That's a wedding thing, a fiesta thing. Pancit noodles, lumpia by the platter, San Miguel going around warm because the refrigerator out there was more of a suggestion than an actual appliance. And the whole meal, Maricel sat right up against me with her hand on my arm, watching my face the whole time to see, was I happy? And I was. I was so happy, it scared me a little. That first night, sitting out back with a warm beer, while the little ones showed me some clapping game with rules I never did understand, I got Boya to talking. And that is where the money first came up, though it came up so gentle I barely marked it. He mentioned, real casual, staring off at the dark cane, that their mother had a heart condition, that she needed to see a specialist doctor in the city, but the little barangay health center couldn't do much for her, and the private hospital. Well, he just shrugged those young shoulders. Money. I didn't offer anything that night, but I lay awake in the little room they'd cleared out special for me, the ceiling fan clicking around and around overhead, a rooster already carrying on at 4 in the morning, and I got to thinking about my own mother, who'd passed with nobody able to do much of anything for her there at the end. And I thought, I have got $200,000 sitting in a bank in Texas doing absolutely nothing. What kind of a man sits on all that while this sweet old woman who cried holding on to my hands can't get in to see a doctor. You see how it works? Nobody put a gun to my head. Nobody so much as asked me for a peso. I talked my own self into the very first one, lying there alone in the dark, feeling like a good man for the first time in about 3 years. The specialist visit ran 50,000 pesos once you added up the tests and the medicines, about $900 American. I handed it to Maricel folded up and told her to go take care of her mama, and the look that came over her face. She cried again. She said no man had ever. And I stood there feeling 10 feet tall and bulletproof. $900 to feel like that. It was the cheapest I ever felt good in my whole life, and if it had stopped there, it'd have been the best $900 I ever spent. It did not stop there. I stayed 3 months on that first trip, kept extending my tourist visa at the immigration office in the city, standing in those long, slow lines under the ceiling fans, learning how the whole machine worked one rubber stamp at a time. And somewhere in those 3 months, on White Beach, over in Boracay, matter of fact, a little getaway we took, sand white as sugar, and the water so blue it didn't look like a real color, watching the sun go down into the sea. I asked that woman to marry me. She said yes before I'd even gotten the whole question out of my mouth. We got married that November, a civil ceremony down at the municipal hall in Iloilo, a judge and 2 witnesses, and Maricel in a white dress her sister had sewn. And then, a fiesta after that, half the barangay turned out for. I paid for the fiesta, naturally. A couple 100,000 pesos by the time you counted the pig and the rented tents and the sound system and a live band and beer for 150 people. Call it $4,000. And I did not so much as blink at it. Because that's what a man does. That is the whole culture, the whole community shares in your joy, and you provide for it. Utang na loob, Grace explained to me one evening. Real careful, wanting me to understand. Debt of gratitude. When somebody does something for you, you carry that debt, and someday you pay it back. And I thought, well now, that's a beautiful thing. That's a sight better than back home, where nobody figures they owe anybody a thing. What I did not understand yet was that a debt of gratitude has got a direction to it. That once you're the Kano, the American, the rich one, and to those folks anybody who flew in from the States is rich. Doesn't matter if you drove a delivery truck for a living. The debt only ever seems to flow the one way. Toward you. Out of you. I'd figure that out. Slow. The way you figure out a slow leak in a tire, checking the pressure a little more often than you used to, and telling yourself it's probably nothing. Probably just the cold. Right after the wedding, we started in on the paperwork for me to stay proper. A 13A marriage visa, they call it. So I wouldn't have to keep doing that tourist extension dance every couple months. And that is when I hit the first thing about that country I didn't understand. And it's a big one, so listen. There is no divorce in the Philippines. None. It is about the only country left on the whole earth where you flat cannot get a divorce. If a marriage goes bad over there, you either get an annulment, which costs a fortune and drags on for years in the courts, or you just stay married forever on paper and live your separate lives. I remember asking Maricel, when the lawyer first brought all that up, "Now, honey, you've never been married before, have you?" Just a checklist kind of question. Filling in a box. And she looked at me for a second. Just 1 second, this little pause, her eyes cutting off sideways to somewhere across the room. And then she said, "No. Never." And she went straight on to telling me about her cousin's new baby. And I let it go. I want to be honest with you about that, because it's the hinge the whole thing swings on. Something in me clocked that pause. the way you clock a little noise in the engine you don't much like the sound of. And I reached over and turned the radio up and drove on. That is the entire story right there, if you want it boiled down to one sentence. I heard the noise, and I turned up the radio. Because I was happy. And I did not want to stop being happy. And a happy man who's afraid of losing it is just about the easiest man in the whole world to work. The house was the big one. Maricel wanted us to have our own place, not up in the half-finished second floor of her mama's house, with the whole clan tramping through at all hours, but our own home, down at the far end of the family land where it was quiet, with a view out over the cane fields toward the hills. And I wanted that too. Don't think I didn't. I wanted it bad. 19 years I'd spent delivering other people's nice things to other people's nice houses, setting boxes down on porches I'd never stand on. The idea of finally having a house of my own, one that I built with my own money, in a place where the sun shone every day of the year, that got right down deep into me where I couldn't argue with it. And here is exactly where a smarter man would have stopped and asked the hard question. And it just so happens here is where I met the one person who flat out tried to make me ask it. There was an old boy who drank at the expat bar in the city, a place called the Smokin' Toad, run by a leathery old Australian. An American fella, Denny, been living in the Philippines 22 years, married to a Filipina the whole time, and happily. The real thing, the genuine article, grandkids and all. And when I let slip to Denny one night that I was fixing to build a house, he set his beer down slow on the bar and he said, "Whose name is the land in, Randy?" I said, "Well, hers. Her mother's, technically. It's family land. Been in the family generations." And Denny nodded, slow, and he said, "Randy, you cannot own land here. You do know that, right? Not you, not any foreigner, not ever. So I want you to understand exactly what it is you're about to do. You are fixing to pay to build a house on ground that will never, not for one single day, be yours. If that woman and you go sideways, that house is theirs. Every peso you put in it. You're not building yourself an asset, son. You are buying the family a very expensive guest room." And I told that man he was just bitter. I actually said that. To a fella who'd stayed happily married 22 years, I called him a bitter old expat. That's the cockiness the host was talking about at the top. I figured I knew better than a man who'd lived it 2 solid decades, because I'd been in love for 8 months, and I had money in the bank. We built the house anyway. 2.5 million pesos by the time it was finished, top to bottom. About $45,000, American. And it was a beauty. I'll give it that much. I'll always give it that. 3 bedrooms, tile floors cool under your bare feet, a real kitchen with a proper counter, and a porch out front where I'd sit of an evening with a cold Red Horse beer and watch the fireflies come lifting up out of the cane in the blue dark. I paid the contractor in installments, cash, and I handed every bit of it through Maricel and her brother because they knew the local fellas and they could get me a better price. They said a Kano price would be double. I never once saw a clean set of receipts for any of it. Every time I asked, there was a reason. The contractor didn't do paperwork. It was cheaper under the table. Why was I worried? Didn't I trust her? Didn't I trust her? That question right there got asked a whole lot over those 2 years, and it worked every single time, because the honest answer was yes, I did. And to keep on answering yes, I had to keep on not looking at things. That's the trade. That's the deal you don't know you're signing. Then came the business. Because you can't just build a house and sit in it. You need some income coming in, and a man my age can't work legally over there without a permit that's damn near impossible to get. So the idea was we'd start a little something in her name. Maricel's notion was a water refilling station. Those purified drinking water shops are all over the Philippines. Everybody buys their water in those big blue 5-gallon jugs. Nobody drinks from the tap. And honestly, it was a solid idea. Steady money, the kind that comes in rain or shine. Boyer would run the day-to-day operation. That was 1.2 million pesos to get set up. A little over $20,000. The filtration machines, the ultraviolet gear, the delivery tricycle, the rent on a storefront in town, the business permits, and the fees. There were always fees, envelopes for this office and that official. A little something for the fella at the city hall. And I did not understand the system near well enough to know which of those fees were real, and which were just somebody's Christmas coming early. I paid all of it. Every envelope. The water station never opened. And I want to be real clear with you about how that went, because it wasn't dramatic. Not even a little. There was no big day where it all crashed down. It just never quite opened. First, the permits got delayed. Then, one of the machines needed a part that had to come down from Manila, and it was back-ordered. Then the storefront we'd rented fell through, the landlord changed his mind, and we needed a new spot, which meant more money. Every single month there was a brand new reason, and every single month it was almost ready. So close, just a little bit more. And every single month it was not ready. And the money for it was gone all the same, whether it opened or not. And right around then is when Boyer got himself a brand new motorcycle. A nice one, a Yamaha, 120,000 pesos, a couple $1,000, straight off the showroom floor, with the plastic still wrapped on the seat. He said it was for the water deliveries. There were no water deliveries. There was no water. I stood in that dusty yard and looked at that shiny new motorbike a long, long time, and then I did the thing I had gotten so terribly good at. I turned up the radio. There was a stretch in there, I'll admit, where I was as happy as the money was pouring out. Don't let me paint it all as misery. That's not honest either. We had good days, real ones. Sunday mornings we'd walk down to the church in Guimble for Mass, her in a nice dress, me in the one-collared shirt I owned that still fit, and afterward we'd get halo at a little place with a tin roof. This crazy dessert with shaved ice and beans and purple yam and a scoop of ube ice cream on top, and she'd feed me spoonfuls of it and laugh at my face. I learned to say a few words of the language. I could count, and I could say I love you, and I could say the food was delicious, which over there is about 90% of what you need. Her nieces started calling me Tito Randy, Uncle Randy, and would come running when my truck pulled up the road. I want you to understand, I wasn't just some sad old sucker being milked in a corner. I had a life over there, a good one, on the surface of it. That's what made the rot underneath so hard to go looking for. Why would you dig under a floor you're happy standing on? And Nanay Faye needed things, ongoing. The heart medicine was a monthly thing now. Then it was the sister's kids' school fees, 50,000 pesos a semester, times 2 children. Then the uncle needed a loan for a fishing boat, and I understood, even at the time, even then, that I was never going to see 1 peso of that money come back. I was sending 20,000 pesos a month just in general family support on top of every other thing. $300–400 a month that went into that household and evaporated like water off the hot road. And every single request came wrapped up in love. And here's the part that'll drive a man clean crazy. Some of it truly was love. Nanay Faye really did have a bad heart. I saw the pills. I saw her gray in the face on the bad days. Those kids really did need their school fees paid. The line between a family taking care of its own and a family taking a foreigner for everything he's got. That line is real. But I'm telling you, you cannot see it from the inside. You're standing right on top of it, and it's invisible under your own 2 feet. I did the math one night, out on that porch, after Maricel had gone to bed. I'd started with a little over $200,000. It had been about 2 years since I flew over. And I'd gone through, I made myself count it up twice, on the back of a water station invoice, somewhere north of $70,000. The house, the business, the wedding, and that steady daily drip. $70,000 gone. And what did I have to show for it? A house I didn't own and couldn't ever own. A business that didn't exist and never sold a drop. And a wife who, lately, had taken to keeping her phone face down on the table when it buzzed. That face-down phone. Such a little bitty thing. But a man notices. Now I want to tell you something about how the truth came to me, because it matters to the whole shape of this. I keep wishing, for the sake of the story, that there'd been one big moment where I found it all out. A text I read over her shoulder. A document I turned over, and there it was. A night I followed a car through the dark. There wasn't. It was not like that. Not for me. It came in little pieces, over months and months, and I kept right on sweeping those pieces under the rug, until there was such a pile heaped up under there that I couldn't cross my own living room without tripping on it. The first piece was Jason. He was a fella from the area who'd gone off years back to work in California, and now he'd come on home. A balik bayan, they call a returnee like that. And he came home flashy. A big diesel pickup truck, gold on both wrists, dollars falling out of his pockets, buying rounds for the whole barangay at the town fiesta, and telling everybody how they do it in the States. Maricel introduced him to me as an old family friend, somebody she'd known since grade school. And that is probably every bit of what he was at first. I want to be fair, even now. At first. But then she started going into the city more. Little errands. A friend's christening she had to attend. A seminar for work at the pharmacy. And she'd come home late from these and she'd be worn out, quiet, and that phone would go straight face down on the table. And I'd ask, gentle as I knew how, and she'd get sharp with me. Didn't I trust her? Was I going to turn into one of those jealous old Americans now? Is that the kind of man I was going to be? And I'd back off, because the only alternative to backing off was to actually look, and I was scared right down to my socks of what looking might show me. The second piece came from Grace, the cousin, the very same one who'd chaperoned that first meeting at the airport 2 years before. The one member of that whole family I truly believe liked me for my own self, and not for what I could do for them. We were at the wet market in town one morning, just her and me, buying fish, and she'd been quiet the whole time. And finally, she just said it, low, not looking at me, her eyes down on the fish. Kuya Randy, you are a good man. I hope you know your papers. And then she picked up the bag and walked off ahead of me. Your papers. That was every word of it. But you don't forget a thing like that. So I went and looked at my papers. And that is when the third piece landed, the big one, the one that broke it all open. And even it didn't land all at once. It came over about 6 weeks, out of me asking careful, quiet questions of careful, quiet people. The lawyer's clerk, an old auntie who'd had too much tanduay at a birthday party. Grace, once, when I finally worked up the nerve to ask her straight. Maricel had been married before, years back, at 19 years old, to a man named Ray, from a town just over the way. It hadn't lasted long. He'd gone off to Manila, and then abroad somewhere for work. Saudi, I think. And he'd just never come back, never called, never sent a thing. But here's the piece you already know if you've been listening to me this whole time. There is no divorce in the Philippines. And they had never annulled it. Of course they hadn't. Nobody in that family ever had 400,000 pesos lying around spare for a lawyer and 3 years of court dates. So they just didn't. And on paper, in the eyes of the law and in the eyes of the church both, Maricel was still married to Ray the entire time she was standing next to me in her sister's white dress at that municipal hall, which meant my marriage was not a marriage. It was void, never legal for one single day, which meant my 13A visa was built on thin air, which meant, and this part took me a while to even get my head around, that she had committed bigamy, which is an actual crime over there, a real one, and that I had no legal standing to a single thing. Not the house, not the business, not the marriage itself. Nothing. I was a tourist who'd been paying the bills for a whole family for 2 years. When I finally sat that woman down, and I want you to know, there was no yelling. I have never in my life been a yeller. I just laid it all out flat on the kitchen table, the papers, the numbers I'd wrote out, Ray's name printed right there. She didn't deny it. That's the thing that stays with me. She didn't fight me on any of it. She cried. And I'll tell you, some of those tears I still believe to this day were real ones. And she said she'd meant to tell me. She'd always meant to. And that she'd been trapped too. That Ray had ruined her when she was just a girl and left her stuck. That she'd never once been able to have a proper life. And then here I came along, and she'd wanted it so bad. A house, a husband, a way out, that she just couldn't make herself say the thing that would take it all away. And she said she loved me. Even then. Even with all of it spread out on that table between us, she looked at me and said she loved me. And the pure hell of it is, I think that was partly true. That's the outcome you don't see coming when you start one of these. Not some cold-blooded con woman who never felt a single thing for you the whole time. A woman who did love me some, and used me a whole lot, and honestly could not have told you her own self where the one stopped and the other one started. I've made my peace with never knowing. Mostly. I asked her about Jason. Straight out. And she looked down at the table. And that was the whole answer, wasn't it? That was all the answer there was. Now, I did not rage. I did not do a single one of the things a man in that spot might feel he had every right to do. And I want to say that just as plain as I can, because I know how some of these stories go, and I know what some fellas listening might be hoping I did. And mine does not go there. Not one step in that direction. What I did was, I went and I sat down with Denny at the Smokin' Toad, and I told that old boy the entire thing, start to finish, and he did not say, I told you so, even though he had it coming about 6 different ways, and we both knew it. He just bought me a cold San Miguel and slid it over and said, all right then, now we get you out of here clean. And that is exactly what we set about doing. Getting out clean. Because here is the one solitary thing I had done right, and I'd done it out of pure dumb luck more than any kind of good sense. I had never moved all my money over there. The 200,000 was mine on paper the whole time, but I'd only ever pulled it across in chunks, a little at a time, as I needed it for the house or the business or whatever was on fire that month. There was still a little over $100,000 sitting safe in my bank account back in Texas that not one soul over there could get a finger on. Not Maricel, not Boyer, not the water station that was never going to sell one jug of water till the end of the world. Denny sat me down at that bar with a napkin and a pen, and we did the arithmetic together, and it came out just about right down the middle. 5 million pesos, all told, over those 2 and some years. About $90,000. Gone. Into that ground I could never own. That family that was never quite mine. That beautiful house on land with somebody else's name on the title. Half of everything I had walked out of Texas with. Half of my whole fresh start. And a little over $100,000 still mine. Still sitting home, still waiting on me. I left that house exactly the way it stood. Didn't take a stick of furniture out of it. What was I going to do? Ship a porch back to Texas? I left the whole thing to them, because on paper it was already theirs and always had been. And because, I'll be honest with you, some worn-out, foolish part of me still wanted Nane Faye to have a good solid roof over that bad heart of hers, whatever it was her daughter had done to me. I signed nothing. I contested nothing. I filed nothing with nobody. I packed the same 2 bags I'd flown over with, and Grace drove me to the airport in Iloilo, crying the whole 2 hours, and she hugged me hard at that same chain-link fence, the very same fence Maricel had stood waving at me across 2 years before. And she said, "This is not your fault, Kuya." And I told her, "It's a little bit my fault, Grace." Because it was. It surely, surely was. And I wasn't going to stand at that fence and pretend otherwise. Now here's the part the title of this thing promised you. Here is how she learned it the hard way. And I want to tell it careful and slow, because I did not have one single thing to do with any of it. And because, I'll warn you now, it does not sit in me the way you might think it would. I heard all of it secondhand, over the year and change after I flew home. Some of it from Grace, who still messages me on Facebook to this day. Some from Denny, and a good bit of it just from watching that small-town grapevine do the thing that small-town grapevines do, over there the same as in Texas. And it went about like this. Jason, the flashy fella, the truck, and the gold. He was a con man, too. A bigger one than Maricel, playing a whole lot bigger a game than she was. Once I was gone, and the American money dried up for good, she went all in on that man. Took what little liquid cash she'd managed to squirrel away out of everything I'd handed her. Took the money that was supposed to have finally opened that water station, and she put it into a business of his. Some resort lot investment up the coast that he was raising money for. Beachfront parcels, sure thing. Get in early. And you already know how that one ends, don't you? There was no resort. There were no lots. Jason took her money, and about 4 or 5 other folks' money besides. And he was gone, back to the States, inside of a year. And here's the kicker Grace told me that I had to sit down on my own porch in Texas to hear. Jason was already married, had a wife back in California the whole entire time. Maricel got done to her, damn near exact, the very same thing that had been done to me. The lies, the money into a thing that wasn't real, even the marriage that couldn't be a real marriage. She'd have married that man too, I expect, if he'd have let her. Then there was the family. Once the money and the American were both gone, that debt of gratitude I told you about, well, it turns out it truly does only ever flow toward whoever's holding the cash. The house was sitting on their land, in Nane Faye's name, every peso of it mine, but not one letter of it in my name. And when Maricel came dragging home, broke and shamed, with Jason's whole mess trailing along behind her, Boyet and the sister decided amongst themselves that the house belonged to the family, which, by the law over there, it flat did, 100%. And they eased her right on out of it. Her own mother's house. The house I built with my own money. And she could not stay in it. Last that Grace told me, Maricel was renting a single room back in town, over a sorry store, working shifts at a different pharmacy. And then the bigamy. Now, understand, in a little Catholic province like that, a thing like that does not stay quiet. Not ever. Ray, the first husband, the one who'd vanished off to Saudi all those years back. His people got wind that Maricel had gone and married herself, a foreigner, and taken him for a small fortune. And there was talk of a bigamy complaint. Real legal trouble. The kind that follows your name around a town for the rest of your natural life. Whether it ever actually went in front of a judge, I honestly don't know, and I didn't go poking to find out. But her name, in that place, amongst those people, the very same way my name went to mud back home in Texas, her name went straight to mud, right there where she'd lived her whole life. Everything she had clawed and schemed and lied to get. The house, the standing, the escape from being that poor girl Ray ruined at 19. All of it, every bit, gone. She ended up right back exactly where she'd started. Only worse off now, because this time, the whole town knew the story. Grace told me one more thing, the last time we really talked about it. She said Maricel had asked after me. Not to get anything, there was nothing left to get. And Grace made sure she knew it. Just asked, how was I? Was I driving again? Was I all right over there in Texas? And Grace said she didn't know what to tell her. And I said, tell her I'm all right, Grace. Because I was, by then. And because whatever she'd done to me, I couldn't find it in me to want her to picture me broken. I don't know what that says about me. My brother would say, it says I never did learn a thing. Maybe he's right. She learned it the hard way. She surely, truly did. And I'll tell you the honest truth about how all that sits with me, because I promised you, honest, at the top, and I'm not going to quit on it here at the end. It does not feel like winning. It doesn't feel like anything close to winning. There were a couple of bad nights early on, right after I got back, where I'd have told you flat out that I was glad, where I sat up with a whiskey and felt the meanness of it. But that passed. It did. What I mostly feel now, when I think on her, which is less than I used to, but more than I let on, is a kind of a sadness for the both of us. Two people who wanted out of the lives they were stuck in so bad, so desperate bad, that we were each of us willing to not look at the plain truth to get there. She just did more damage with it than I did, and she had less of a soft place to land when it all came down. I'm back in Texas now. Got my license reinstated. Took the classes, paid the fines, did the time, all of it, humble as you please. Driving a route again, different company, and you know what? It's fine. It's good even. That rhythm I told you about way back at the start. The clock, the odometer, the loose board on the porch, the old lady on Magnolia who flags me down whether she's got a package or not. Turns out that was never the small little life I thought I was escaping from. It was just my life, a decent one, an honest one. And I had to fly clear around the whole entire planet and lose $90,000 to finally figure out there wasn't one solitary thing wrong with it in the first place. I've still got a little over $100,000, a paid-off truck, a quiet one-bedroom apartment with a decent view of the parking lot, and a recliner that fits me. And most nights, I'm all right. Most nights, I really am. Do I miss her? Yeah, I do. God help me, I do. I miss the woman who asked me what Texas smelled like, whether that woman was ever fully real or not. And you can go ahead and think whatever you want about that. You can miss something and know full well it was never yours to keep. Both at the same time, I've stopped trying to make those two things not be true, because they just are. If you're a man out there right now sitting where I sat, lonely, burned down to the studs, a little money in the bank and a phone that lights up sweet every single morning, I am not going to sit here and tell you don't. I'm not your daddy, and I'm not any better than you. But I'll leave you the two things I know for certain, and they cost me $45,000 apiece to learn, so they're paid for. Whose name is the land in? And has this person got a past they go quiet about? That's it. That's the whole guide. Ask the boring questions, the dull ones, the ones that make you feel like a suspicious old fool for asking. Turn the radio down and actually listen to the noise in the engine. It is trying to tell you something. That noise. It always is. And I promise you it is always, always cheaper to hear it early than it is to hear it late. That's Randy's story. You heard him say it himself? Right there, near the end? It's a little bit my fault. That is a hard, hard thing for a man to say out loud, especially a proud one. And it's the truest thing in this whole story. And it is exactly the reason I wanted you all to hear this particular one. Because the easy version, the one where she's all villain and he's all innocent victim, that version doesn't help a soul. But the real one does. Two people both reaching for a life they couldn't quite have. And one of them happened to have $90,000 and no local ground under his feet to stand on. That right there isn't evil. It's just how these things happen, over and over and over again. And about the only thing in this world that changes it is somebody up at the front asking the plain, boring questions before the money ever starts to move. So take a second, if you would, and leave something down in the comments for Randy, where you're watching from, what stuck with you, your own story if you carry one. Because somebody scrolling by tonight, lonely, with a plane ticket half bought in another tab, just might read it and turn the radio down in time. Thank you for being here and for listening the way that you do. Look after yourselves out there, and look after each other while you're at it. This has been Inside the Philippines Journals. We'll see you next time.